Imagine paying for a ticket to watch your favorite team win the World Series, only to find out years later that the players you were cheering for had already decided to lose before the first pitch was ever thrown. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is exactly what happened in 1919. And it did not just destroy 8 men's careers, it almost destroyed an entire sport's soul. The year is 1919. America is crawling out of World War I. People are tired, beaten down, and desperately looking for something to believe in. Baseball was that thing. It was not just a game, it was a national religion. Stadiums were packed, players were heroes, and the Chicago White Sox were the best team in the country. They were talented, disciplined, and heavily favored to win the 1919 World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. On paper, it was not even supposed to be a close series. The White Sox were simply better. Everyone knew it. But what nobody knew, not the fans, not the press, not even most of the players themselves, was that a quiet, dirty deal had already been made in the shadows.
His name was Arnold Rothstein. If you have never heard that name, you should have. He was one of the most powerful gamblers and organized crime figures in New York City. Smart, calculating, and completely without conscience when it came to money. Rothstein did not approach the players directly. He used middlemen, 2 gamblers named Sport Sullivan and Sleepy Bill Burns, to do the dirty work. The plan was breathtakingly simple and criminally bold. Pay the players to intentionally lose the World Series, place enormous bets against the White Sox, and walk away with a fortune. 8 players agreed to it. The number that history would remember is 8. 8 men who decided that money was worth more than the game, more than their teammates who were not in on it, and more than the millions of fans who trusted them completely. The amount they were supposed to receive? Around $10,000 each. For context, that was a significant sum in 1919, but it was nowhere near the hundreds of thousands of dollars that Rothstein and his associates were quietly betting against them. The players were not just underpaid, they were being used, and they did not even fully realize it.
The 1919 World Series was a best-of-9 format. From the very first game, things looked wrong. The White Sox played sloppily. Errors that professional players should never make started piling up. Pitchers who were dominant during the regular season were suddenly struggling with basic control. Runs were given away at strange moments. The Cincinnati Reds won the series 5-3. Sports writers noticed the poor play. Some fans noticed too. But in 1919, there was no social media, no slow-motion replays, no analytics. Suspicion existed, but proof was another matter entirely. The story might have stayed buried forever if it were not for a grand jury. Almost a full year later, in September 1920, a grand jury in Illinois began investigating gambling in baseball. It was not even originally about the World Series. But as investigators started pulling on threads, confessions started to appear. 3 of the 8 players, pitcher Eddie Cicotte, outfielder Joe Jackson, and utility player Claude Williams, gave grand jury testimony admitting they had been part of the fix. Their confessions were damning, detailed, and devastating. The story exploded across every newspaper in America. The 8 players, now permanently known as the 8 Men Out, were immediately suspended by the White Sox owner Charles Comiskey, even though the 1920 pennant race was still happening. Their team was in a tight race for the championship, and losing those players effectively ended their season. Then came the legal process, and then came the verdict that stunned everyone. In August 1921, all 8 players were put on trial. By this point, their signed confessions had mysteriously disappeared from the courthouse. Without those documents, the prosecution's case was severely weakened. The jury acquitted all 8 men. The courtroom reportedly erupted in celebration. Fans who were present cheered. Some jurors allegedly went out to dinner with the players that same night. But the celebration lasted exactly one day. Because the very next morning, the newly appointed commissioner of baseball, a federal judge named Kennesaw Mountain Landis, issued a statement that became one of the most severe and permanent decisions in sports history. Regardless of the verdict of juries, he declared, no player who had participated in throwing a game would ever be allowed to play professional baseball again. All 8 men were banned for life. Not suspended, not put on probation, banned forever. The Black Sox scandal did not just remove 8 players from the game. It fundamentally changed how baseball and all professional sports thought about integrity, corruption, and the relationship between athletes and organized gambling. Kennesaw Mountain Landis served as commissioner for over 2 decades after that ruling. His hard line on gambling shaped the structure of professional sports governance for generations. The idea that a sports league needs an independent authority with real power to protect the integrity of the game, that idea came directly from 1919. The scandal also permanently attached a question mark to the career of one of the 8, Joe Jackson, whose natural talent was so extraordinary that even his supporters could not fully explain away his involvement. His ban from baseball has kept him out of the Hall of Fame to this day, more than 100 years later. The debate about his case is still alive. And Arnold Rothstein, the man who almost certainly orchestrated the entire scheme, who made the most money, who never confessed and never faced charges, was never prosecuted for his role. He was shot and killed in a poker game dispute in 1928, taking whatever he knew completely to his grave. 8 men, 1 World Series, 1 fixed result, and a scandal so enormous that it forced an entire sport to look in the mirror and decide what it actually stood for. The Black Sox betrayal is not just a baseball story. It is a story about greed, about trust, about what happens when the people the public believes in the most decide that belief is something they can quietly sell. The fans who packed those 1919 stadiums deserved better, and the fact that we are still talking about this more than a century later tells you exactly how deep the wound actually was.